Hi everyone, welcome to another video here on my channel. I'm Sid2, aka Ian, and I've got something that's a little different for me. I do a lot of posting about movies or shows that I happen to be watching through on my Twitter, and I was posting about the Lilo and Stitch animated series and movies, because I've been in the mood and I was watching those again. I was actually able to get a version made of boots and legs of the animated series, and so I was watching through that, and it's a show that I had a lot of nostalgia for, and someone on Twitter just asked me to do a review. So here's my rambly thoughts off the top of my head review of all the Lilo and Stitch movies and the animated series. Alright, so the original Lilo and Stitch movie is something I fell in love with on just conception alone when I was a kid. It came out in like 2002. I was 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. It was perfect for me. Everything about the trailers, the way they marketed the thing, really got me intrigued. I saw the movie, loved it to death. It's probably my favorite animated, like, original Disney film. And that's not like a hard thing for me, because I'm not a huge fan of animated Disney stuff, but Lilo and Stitch it hits all these perfect weird notes. It gets so much right. I love how much of a real kid Lilo is. You know, they have that joke, I guess you'd call it, in the very beginning of the movie where she goes to feed the fish a peanut butter sandwich because he controls the weather, and that's just such a kid thing. I remember being that age and in some way, shape, or form thinking like that at times. And so it just really works for me. But I don't want to talk too much about just the original film. Everyone's pretty much said everything there is to say about that movie. It's over 10 years old. It's getting close to 20 years old at this point. Man, I feel old. It's getting so old at this point that I don't really feel like I have much to say about the film itself. Where I do have input, and where I don't think many people talk about, or what I don't think many people talk about, is the sequels and the animated series. So we have Stitch the movie, which is the pilot that sets up the animated series. And let me just quickly talk about the order I watched all this stuff in. Watch the original film, watch Stitch the movie, watch the first season of Lilo and Stitch the series, watch Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch, watch the second season of the series, watch Leroy and Stitch. I think the second film, Lilo and Stitch 2, even though it's technically the third film, fits better in that place. But anyway, so yeah, I really did get into the animated, the first animated like television pilot, basically, where they introduced Stitch's cousin, and where they introduced Stitch's cousins, rather. And the first movie really does capture, I think, everything that works for me about the series and the concept, because Disney did a lot of this with these animated series based on their character, based on their big hit films. And a lot of them don't really make sense, or don't really have much of continuity. Like, I've heard people talk about the Hercules show, and they have to completely ignore the fact that Hades doesn't know Hercules is alive to make that show work. The Aladdin show, I don't know what that's about. I guess it's Aladdin having adventures even though he's in the palace and everything. Whatever works there. But a lot of the shows that they had that were based on their movies really didn't have legs. Like, the movies are good movies, or good enough movies, but they really only work for that one narrow concept. And so, trying to spin a series out of that doesn't really hold water, because there's such a limited concept. And you could certainly make that argument with Lilo and Stitch, that there's not really room for a lot more, that everyone learns their lesson by the end. But what I like about the show and this first movie is that it naturally builds. We, in the first movie, established Stitch is experiment 626. So there are 625 others. Very natural place to create a series where you go and catch all 625 others. And the way they set this up in the first movie works really well. You figure you could waste a lot of those potential episodes just in a spin-off movie. But instead, it's all about just showing how difficult it is to catch one. And then they have to convince it to actually care about them. And they have to save it so that it's invested in them. Because these things are programmed to just cause havoc. So it's really neat to see that all come together in that first film and to establish that no one's a monster just because the world made them to be. That everyone has some kind of glimmer of hope. That everyone has some place they belong. And so that's what, like, everyone's ready to just give up on these experiments, let them be used for evil purposes or destroy them. Lilo and Stitch are the only ones who are like, no, you can't do that. They're Ohana. They are family. You can't just get rid of them. You can't abandon them. They matter. And that's a really sweet message. And the way they end it with Lilo setting Sparky up at a damn lighthouse that hasn't worked in decades or whatever, it's just really heartfelt. Like, there's this great music swell that happens with it. The secret agent Bubbles and the space lady are like, my God, this girl, she knows what she's talking about. And it really works. It's a very emotionally satisfying ending that starts off a fantastic idea for a series. So let me talk about season 1 a little bit. Actually, I'm not going to talk about this in the order in which I watched it. Maybe a little bit, but... So season 1 and 2, I mean, it's a very formulaic concept for a show, and I remembered it being pretty damn by the numbers. Opens up with some kind of scene with Lilo, or a scene with the monster being released, then goes to a scene of Lilo that establishes what the theme of the episode will be in some way, shape, or form. Then the monster shows up, and it is coincidentally very similar in design to whatever the problem of that episode is. And then they resolve the thing, and Lilo learns a lesson and all this stuff. That's the formula, and plenty of episodes match that formula. But they know when to break the formula often enough, and they know when to change things subtly, but just enough that it doesn't get too monotonous. There are episodes that do a really good job of breaking formula, breaking the status quo. There's one episode where an asteroid is coming to Earth, and we're not introduced to any new experiments in that episode. It's like midway through season 1, I want to say, where we have this asteroid coming, and so they round up other experiments that they've already, captured and turned to good, and then fly to the asteroid, land, and do a whole thing to save the Earth. That's a good formula break. There are other episodes that do that too, but it shows, that's just a good example to show where they know how not to just stick to a predictable formula all the time, and I really appreciate that about it. Also, the thing that I love so much about the series, and I think a lot of kids got into, because I know I was certainly attracted to that point, was the really creative monster designs for the experiments. And what's really impressive, like, they look really cool, they do all these neat things, but what's particularly impressive about it is they all, even though they look wildly different, they use some very simplistic tricks to keep the image that they are all related to Stitch. In the first movie, or not first movie, in the spin-off movie that creates the series, the pilot movie, there's the scene where Sparky is like inside of a glass jar and Stitch is looking at him. And they do a couple quick things back and forth where, like, Stitch puts out his second pair of arms and Sparky does the same. Stitch picks his nose with his tongue, which is just a wonderfully adorable, disgusting little thing. And Sparky does the same thing. There's all these, like, little subtle things that they do with character design. A lot of the experiments have spots on them and have black eyes. And it just works so that you are able to create, like, these really fascinating, neat concepts for these monster designs, but you're also able to make it feel like you're not just drawing Stitch over and over again, but it's like it's like a red Stitch and a green Stitch and all this stuff, which they eventually do. I'm not gonna lie, but they do enough with different monsters, but they still feel related to Stitch, which I really, really like. It looks like Jumba has a particular style, which is great. Jumba and Cleekly are written just absolutely fantastically. There's a lot of really smart writing in the show that completely went over my head as a kid. Absolutely hilarious writing. Jumba and Cleekly do a lot of it. There's like this one bit where Cleekly is growing an enormous pineapple that he calls Pinormous, and he's going to enter it in a state fair and try to win and all this stuff. And he goes, "First my Pinormous will win the state fair, and then the world!" And Jumba comes in and he's like, "Oh, careful, you're starting to sound like evil genius." "Maybe, but I'll be an evil genius for good." Is always starting this way. I love that. It's just a really cute little moment. There's all kinds of stuff like that. I was watching like Leroy and Stitch, and they do this really sad thing at the end, or at one point where they're listening to a really sad Elvis song, and Jumba's like, "Maybe Other Side of Record is less depressing." Just Jumba's written great. I think he might be my favorite character in the series. But there's also a lot of smart writing just with Gantu and other stuff, and I'll talk about Gantu in a second here. Like at one point, Gantu is on the beach, and he walks up to an old couple, because he's looking for an experiment, and he goes, "Have you seen any strange-looking creatures here?" And they go, "Just you? Why are you so tall?" "I'm from the 8th planet of the I'm Samoan." That's great. That's just really funny writing. And that never would have hit for me as a kid. So yeah, I just love the crap out of the way the series is written. There are still problems. Like I said, it's got a reasonably formulaic thing. They do enough to break with it. It also has a bit of a villain problem. The villain of the series is Dr. Jacques von Hamsterville, who works through Gantu. Gantu's job is to go collect experiments and send them to Hamsterville. Hamsterville's job is to be mean to Gantu and insult him for being incompetent. Their relationship is fine, but the fact of the matter is those are the only... It's Lilo, Stitch, Gantu, and Hamsterville. Those are the people looking for experiments. You have a sub-villain who is Myrtle, the little annoying girl, and she's, insufferable. And on a couple occasions, she shows up and has a little moment here or there where she's like an actual antagonist involved in the experiments, but those are pretty far and few between, so it's not enough to break the villain problem. And they do some stuff to break the villain problem. It's not completely formulaic. Like I say, they do episodes where there are no villains. It's just a threat that needs to be stopped. They do episodes where Lilo's creating the problem and needs to find a way to fix it. And the experiment's not really involved. There's the episode, Melty is like that, where there's an experiment who melts things, but it's a time travel episode. And Lilo's the one creating the problem. She's not a perfect protagonist, and I really enjoy that about it. There's just a lot of really clever stuff. And I will say, I think I prefer the first season over the second. The second season gets to the point where it gets really, really over the top, because for some reason Disney wanted to establish a shared universe within their different animated series. That's not a good idea. So we get 4 crossover wait. Yeah, we get 4 crossover episodes. One with Kim Possible. That is the only one that makes any sense or works at all. One with the Proud Family. That is completely ridiculous and stands out like a sore thumb. One with the gang from Recess, which makes even less sense than the one with the Proud Family. And then one with American Dragon Jake Long, which just, like, the art style is so radically different between those series. American Dragon Jake Long is a very two-dimensional character drawing and stuff, and they do not look good. They don't look good at all. Put in the Lilo and Stitch thing. I don't know too much about American Dragon Jake Long. That's not a series I ever watched growing up. I know of it, but like it's weird because from what I understand of it, that might be the one on a story level that could have made the most sense to cross over, but it didn't. Like, the story for that episode is not exceptionally clever or smart blend of those two shows' formulas whatsoever. The Proud Family, the Recess one is just out of place and silly and doesn't make any sense. The Proud Family one is out of place and silly and doesn't make any sense, and it just goes over the top. It jumps the shark. Sugar Mama beats up Gantu. I'm sorry. There's already a villain problem with Gantu being kind of pathetic. To go that far to the point where he can get beat up by an old black lady, I don't care how ordinary she is, it's a problem. It lessens him as a character and as a threat to the other experiments, and that's not something you needed to do with someone who is already pretty lessened as a threat or a character to the other experiments. So that's certainly disappointing. What else with the show itself? There's a lot of really fun, because Lilo is a character who, one of her quirks is that she really likes old horror / sci-fi films. And so a number of episodes actually are just their versions of some of those classic, like, sci-fi horror film plots. What is it? I can't remember the original name of the movie, but you see it all the time in sci-fi. I know Doctor Who did a version of this, and a bunch of other series do this. It's a callback to an old 50s sci-fi movie where, like, the doctors shrink down to go inside the patient and cure them, yada yada. And it's always usually like some kind of time crunch related to it. Yeah, blah, 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 whatever. But they do an episode where there's an experiment that's like a single-cell organism, and they have to shrink down and go inside Cleekly to get it out. And that's like the first episode of the series, actually. Just, that works. That's a good solid episode. And there's a lot of episodes that do stuff like that, where they come up with a new their version of this, like, kind of tried and true concept of science fiction, and that's really enjoyable to watch. It's just kind of fun, cute, and so, like, of course Lilo knows how to deal with this. She's watched all the movies on it. It's great. I love it. There are a couple, like, themed holiday-ish episodes, and the monsters they get for those, they're not the best. Like, I really like the first Halloween episode we get where the monster is like a bucket from Harry Potter, where it turns into your greatest fear. Jumba has a great line about that one where he's like, oh, it does terrifying impression of ex-wife. Really, yeah, love it. But yeah, there's like a monster in the Halloween episode. That one was pretty good. When we get to a Christmas episode, there's like it's a star that lights up is the monster of that one, and that's disappointing. So it's hit and miss. The series certainly isn't perfect. I don't want to give that impression. yeah, that's pretty much like the gist of what I have to say. Oh wait, there's one other episode I want to make sure I talk about. I think that Lilo and Stitch may have created a very disturbing trend in fan art / fan fiction. There's an episode in season 2 called French Fry. And he like makes food that's just empty calories that people eat, so they just balloon up and become fatter and fatter and fatter. And I'll put a little bit of like actual image from the episode right here. And then I don't know. No, I'm not gonna do it. But if you've spent any amount of time on DeviantArt, you've seen shit like that. You've seen it. Characters drawn that way. So I'm gonna blame Lilo and Stitch for that one. It's this really weird fucking thing. And it's like that's otherwise it's kind of just a whatever episode, but that particular vision of showing it is pretty damn creepy. And I blame it for inspiring a creepy ass version of fan art that we've seen. Trend in fan art. There we go. So yeah, there's that. The only other thing I want to talk about is I really like the names that Lilo gives a lot of the characters. Like a lot of them seem really obvious, and of course I can't think of an example off the top of my head. Damn it. A lot of them just appear really obvious. Like Sparky is the name for the first monster we meet, and his whole thing is that he blows up stuff. There's like a crab monster whose job it is to get inside of like machines and break them down, and it's just, a little tiny, it's like the size of an actual crab, and Lilo calls it short stuff, and they go, oh, because it's short? No, because he likes to short stuff out. So there's an example of how she names them, and it's always kind of cute. There's one name that this is just a general thing that bothers me of people using a word without knowing what it means. So the last episode of the series itself is called Snafu, and most episodes are named after the monsters. So the name of the monster is Snafu, whose job it is to like ruin plans. Snafu is a military term that soldiers use, and it means situation normal all fucked up. So to hear Lilo call something a snafu, and it's funny because we see like I'm not a football fan or whatever, but you catch what family members are watching from time to time, yada yada. You'll hear it now, if you haven't, where football announcers and shit will say stuff like, oh, that play was a real snafu, or oh, that play was foobar. Snafu means situation normal, all fucked up. Foobar means fucked up beyond all recognition. So, when you see someone say that on network television, it's always a bit, how the fuck you get away with that? It's because people don't know what the actual word means. I guess it'd be weird. Like, could you get away with saying WTF on television? Because it stands for what the fuck. Interesting question. Regardless, though. So I want to talk about the second movie, technically the third movie, Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch. This thing is so out of place. And just... It's such an awkward fit. Forgive me for not remembering the name of the actress that plays Lilo in the rest of the stuff. Because the first movie, the Stitch, the movie, Leroy and Stitch, and all throughout the animated series, it's one voice actress playing Lilo. And her voice never changes. It doesn't feel like it gets older or anything. It doesn't feel like she ages out of the part, but they kept her around anyway. She does a tremendous job voicing Lilo throughout the entirety of the series. In Lilo and Stitch 2, they changed Lilo to Dakota Fanning. Everyone else is voice acted by the same people. Dakota Fanning plays Lilo. And it's not that she does a bad job. It's just so fucking distracting because it's not the same actress and everyone else is. Why? Why would you do that? Like, there's no reason that is a workable decision. The movie came out while the series was still on air. There's absolutely no justification for why that choice was made, other than Dakota Fanning is popular. Well, you know what? Lilo and Stitch was popular too, so suck it, Disney. That is just the most distracting element, and it actively damages the film itself. Lilo and Stitch 2 is a pretty good movie. It's an enjoyable film. It's a little bit MacGuffin-y at the end, but whatever. You know, it's not perfect, but it's got some really good heart, some really good emotion. It's technically out of continuity because of this thing that happens with Myrtle. Myrtle, like, there's this big hula competition, and Myrtle turns her dance in it, her hula in it, into an ad for her dad's store. But several times throughout the animated series, we established that Myrtle's dad left. And it's just like a small little thing. They don't make a big deal out of it, so it's a nice little subtle touch to explain, hey, there are other kinds of families out there. But, so it's this weird continuity error, so it's technically not in continuity. It's a good scene in the movie, it's fine, but whatever. But yeah, the story of the movie, you know, there's some interesting stuff done. I don't want to go through like a plot synopsis or whatever, but there's some interesting stuff done with the story and the characters and places they take them, and the animation does look really good. It's somewhere in between the beauty of the first movie and the streamlined version of the animated series and stuff, but it does a pretty good job of, you know, just working. It's got a great opening scene as far as animation goes when they're diving around. Really, really enjoyable to watch. So the second movie isn't bad, it's just casting Dakota Fanning was such a poor decision that it just actively harms the rest of the film. What else is there to say about the second movie? It's just kind of there, because it's so distracting. Maybe if you watch it just on its own, it'll be fine, but if you watch it as part of the rest of it, of the rest of the stuff in Lilo and Stitch continuity, it really sticks out like a sore thumb. So, I guess it depends. If you want to watch all of it together, I'd say the best way to do it is Lilo and Stitch, Stitch the movie, first season of the show, Lilo and Stitch 2, second season of the show, Leroy and Stitch. If you don't want to watch it all together, but you want to watch the series, first movie, Stitch the movie, show, Leroy and Stitch. So let's talk about Leroy and Stitch, though, which is one of the best conclusions to a series I've ever seen. They do just a fantastic job of ending it, keeping with all the same themes that are just absolutely fantastic. It really is just beautiful. Just fundamentally, it is a beautiful film. And they do a great job of capturing all the heart and the emotion that you felt throughout the series. It's a great send-off to a really fun show. They understand their source material. They understand what the message of their series of the original movie was. They know how to carry it all through, and it works just beautifully. The way they end it, the way they like fake you out, where it's gonna be an epic battle, and you get a little bit of an epic battle, and it's cool as shit to watch. But they also go, okay, now we're gonna be Lilo and Stitch and be Disney and, you know, have a little bit of heart. And they do a great job of that. Oh, I mentioned this earlier, but now's a good time to talk about it too. So there's Stitch, Angel, Leroy, and Experiment 627 that are pretty much just identical to Stitch. So you have Stitch, his design, big floppy ears. You have that repeated with Angel, who is just a pink Stitch. Angel's an interesting enough character. The way that she works is she's cute. She's only in a couple, like 2 episodes in the final film. So that's, it's whatever. It's kind of lazy, but they don't overdo it to the point where it's annoying, so it's fine. And Leroy is just a red Stitch with slightly different ears, but that works okay because they incorporate it as part of the movie. Like, when he's created, Hamsterville orders Jumba to give him an updated version of 626. So that's fine. Then you have Experiment 627. Leroy? No, that's stupid, Ian. Evil. All he does is say evil. He's just meant to be a tougher, more evil version of Stitch because Stitch gets full of himself at one point. That's fine. It's maybe a little, how to put this? Like, he doesn't look exactly like Stitch. He's got a slightly different shaped head, that helps. And he has slightly different powers. He has, like, 6 arms, and he can make 2 heads, and his mouth can kind of do the xenomorph thing, which is creepy. So he's different enough that it's fine. But like I said earlier, they do a really good job of just very different, but still very overarchingly similar character design, which is great. You get a lot of variety with some very similar elements used throughout to create some really unique character designs that all feel related. But in Leroy and Stitch, Leroy's created, and yeah, just it's a good movie. The way they work all their themes together and do a good job of showing it's okay to let someone move on and go to a different part of their life, but hey, maybe moving on and going to a different part of your life isn't the best idea. Maybe you're happy with what you have and you just don't realize it. So they do a really good job with that. It's some really interesting themes. I love the way it ends with the song. It's perfect. Aloha Away. Yeah, there we go. So there's the entirety of my thoughts. Not the entirety of my thoughts. There's my thoughts on the entirety of the Lilo and Stitch series proper, which is, yeah, it's all pretty good. Really enjoyable. I think it's, without having rewatched all of the Disney series, I think you can make a pretty good argument that it is the most logically sound, structurally good Disney series. Far from perfect, has mistakes. I would have liked for Gantu to capture more experiments in the show itself. That doesn't really happen a lot. It's kind of disappointing. He gets a couple here and there, and they're smart enough to let him win when he needs to, just to, keep the thread around and not have to shoehorn in the one true place thing too often. I guess if I did have a complaint, the biggest one would be some of the one true place moments just feel a little tacked on when we see where Lilo puts the experiments. They just feel a little tacked on, and that's an issue, but we come back to him from time to time, and it works. It just works. That's something that I think would be a personal judgment call, and watch the series yourself to see how you feel about it. Alright, so that would seem like I'm done talking about Lilo and Stitch. And oh, if only I could be. But my fucking God, I have never been so pissed off by a thing in my life. So there's a Lilo and Stitch anime series, except it's not a Lilo and Stitch anime series. It's a Stitch anime series. And honestly, that would be fine. It would be okay in some way, shape, or form to just give Stitch his own series. I could see a series where Stitch goes off and has adventures in space and then comes back to Earth from time to time. I'd watch that. It's not what they do. I've never been so pissed. Like I say, Leroy and Stitch leaves that series on such a perfect note, and every single character is satisfied in just a really great way. It is arguably one of the most perfect endings to a television series ever. It's like that and Frasier in my book. Stitch is an anime series, and literally I watched the first 2 minutes of the first episode and got so mad that I just closed the fuck out of it, and I'm just livid as shit. So it starts out with Stitch running away from police in like a hover thing. That's fine. And then Jumba catches up with him and says, 626, just because Lilo grew up and got boyfriend does not give you excuse to act this way. There's a very simple message to Lilo and Stitch. They kind of repeat the fuck out of it constantly. That message is, Ohana means family. Family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. And literally within the first minute of this anime garbage series, Stitch was left behind and assumedly forgotten about by Lilo because she just grew up and got over him. That's so fucked up. That's not okay at all. I don't care if they rectify it in any way, shape, or form throughout the series. That's a garbage way to start your series. And it just shits on everything that worked about the original series. I have never been so pissed off by something in the first minute of its runtime as I was by that. Just, wow, what a way to fuck up. What an amazingly impressive way to fuck up. It's almost like they tried to piss me off. Because, my God, they did a good job of it. Whew! So yeah, I'm never watching that garbage. So don't expect a review of Stitch ! The series. Because I ain't gonna fucking do it. Because that thing can go, like, rot in a dumpster somewhere. That's horseshit. What they did in the first minute of that series. I don't care what the hell else they did after that point. Garbage. Absolute garbage. Okay. That concludes my thoughts on Lilo and Stitch, including the movies and Stitch! The trash fire. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I didn't ramble on too much and that you got something out of this. Oh, of course, I say all that. There's a Lilo and Stitch video game. Stitch Experiment 626. It's not very good. Camera angles suck. It's kind of fun to play as Stitch, though. There you go. My thoughts. Bye.